Yes. Okay.
Okay. Hello, welcome back, everybody. Great to be with you, sis.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
We're on lesson 16, moving right along. How do you feel? Do you want to take it or shall I?
No, you can start it. That'd be great.
Okay, turn my volume up here. All right. Lesson 16, I have no neutral thoughts. The idea for today is a beginning step in dispelling the belief that your thoughts have no effect. Everything you see is the result of your thoughts. That is such a big statement and such a departure from the world.
Well, yeah. Okay. So what you're saying, or what he's saying, just double checking that everything we see is a result of our thoughts. Does that mean everything, or does he really mean everything? Or is it there, or are there some things that we see that are not a result of
Well,
our thoughts?
it's funny you should ask that, because his next sentence is, there is no exception to this fact. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Without exception, everything that we see is the result of our thoughts. So everything is the content of our thoughts and beliefs. Wow, that's huge. There's no exception to this fact. He
so
says,
sorry.
oh, go ahead.
So let me have a look at this. What about this? See that pen?
Yeah, we see it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this is this content, this pen, is a thought,
Mm-hmm.
or is it a result of my thought and it's real?
Depends on what you want it to be, I guess.
Right.
It's a thought, but how we perceive or think of that thought, it's really the filter in which we're seeing, right? Through Christ's vision as a thought, or with an ego thought system, which says the pen is material and can change. Can be a working pen, a non-working pen. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. But what you're saying is that this pen, or whatever the object might be, cannot work independently apart from my thoughts, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's a big one.
Yeah.
Mm.
And our body and the world and others. Yeah. Our thought governs everything. Thoughts are not big or little, powerful or weak. And I love this. They are merely true or false. Those which are.
Go on. So they're just true or false?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think, just to clarify here, he's not talking about true or false, the ego's version of true and false. He's talking about it being true, which means it comes from God's thinking,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
And it comes from love, union,
yes.
joining, or it's false. It's coming from the ego's thought system, which is guilt, sin, guilt, and fear.
That's so true. Yes, and all true thoughts are from the mind of God.
Mm-hmm.
So only God's thoughts are true, and everything that comes from an ego is false. So the demarcation for thoughts, it's a true thought or it's a false thought.
Which means it's meaningless, right?
Right. Yes.
Here.
Those which are true create in their own likeness. Those which are false create, in quotes, in theirs. There is no more self-contradictory concept than that of, quote, idle thoughts. What gives rise to the perception of a whole world can hardly be called idle. Every thought you have contributes to truth or to illusion. Either it extends the truth or it multiplies illusions. You can indeed multiply nothing, but you will not extend it by doing so. And by this, he's really driving home the point that only what can be extended is true and therefore a thought of God. But the ego can attempt to take illusions and multiply them, right? Through its filter.
But nothing real is happening. And in fact, as we advance in our progress as far as trust is concerned, we're going to find that that nothing from the ego thought system really can be shared. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Only what's true can be, yes. Have we covered that? Has he said that before? Because that's such a major core idea, that only what can be shared is true. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. In addition to never being idle, salvation requires that you recognize that every thought you have will bring either peace or war, either love or fear. A neutral thought is impossible because a neutral thought is impossible.
Can I just, I have a different sentence here
Yeah,
in the
please.
version. A neutral result is impossible
Mm.
because a neutral thought is impossible.
Well, that was the ego right there, because it says result here too. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
A neutral result is impossible because a neutral thought is impossible. There is such a temptation to dismiss certain fear thoughts as unimportant, trivial, and not worth bothering about, that it is essential you recognize them all as equally destructive, but equally unreal. We will practice this idea in many forms before you really understand it. And, I think it's about recognizing that every thought is going to bring a result. So because there are no neutral thoughts, every thought we have is either falling on the side of truth, which results in peace and joy, or it falls on the side of it's false, and that results in a meaningless perception, which brings up feelings of threat, fear, guilt, anxiety.
Conflict.
Yeah, conflict. So we're always drawing one or the other to us. It's not like there's a middle ground or some third location where you can be outside of this law that every thought brings with it results.
It manifests at the form level, every thought we have.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is that huge accountability part, right?
Oh, yeah.
We're never victims. We can't be complaining because it's our own selection of the thoughts or the thought system that we follow and worship that brings us our situations and our conditions.
Yes, and unfortunately, when we begin this, more than 90% of our thoughts are largely unconscious.
Yeah. Hey, we have a great diagram on that.
We do.
Do you want to introduce that?
We do. It's from the End of Death, Volume 1. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I do. Just a minute here. I had it right there. Hold on, sis. There it is. Okay. All right.
It's some way you can produce it. Yeah, that's.
Okay. And I'm going to see if I can reduce us there. All right. How's that?
Well, my screen only shows a third of it, the picture. It doesn't show the whole picture. Oh, as you scroll, I see it. Oh, that's better. That's better. Okay. Thank you. Now we see the whole picture. Yeah.
Right.
Awesome.
Do you want to take them? Do you want to take them through this? This is a diagram.
Oh, I think we both can. Yeah, we can see here. I mean, this is purely a symbol, a helpful symbol, to show that when we begin undoing the ego thought system and slowly coming into the holy self that we really are with the Holy Spirit, what we're going to find is that most of our thoughts are meaningless. You got to laugh, right? But they're meaningless, but they're not neutral. They're not idle. So a good 90% or more of our thoughts are hidden in our unconscious when we begin this journey. And they need to be flushed up and out to the light with Holy Spirit so that the ego thought system is no longer seemingly unconsciously sabotaging us in our relationships with conflict, with the body, with pain, disease, etc., and finances, etc., our life, right? Because until we begin this journey and still begin flushing out our, meaningless thoughts, then it's going to continue to sabotage us. And
Right.
we'll do what the ego says to do, which is to blame it on other people, circumstances, etc., and to really feel as if we have been or we are being victimized. That's what it wants, right? Because
Yeah.
as you see in this diagram, the ego has a central altar, and everything that it believes in eventually leads to its central altar, which is its belief that death is its central dream, physical death, all forms of death, right? Which is really the fear of God. We won't go into that now because it's too premature. Did you want to add to this, sis?
Yeah, well, I'm realizing, first of all, the split from remembering when we left God, who is our mind, who's the only mind, then we needed a substitute. It's fraudulent, it's not true, but something to replace the mind of God, and what we made was the ego thought system. So there's a split. And then how interesting, that even so now that we're subscribing to the ego thought system, and we believe that we're mythical me, and we believe every thought that the ego comes up with, even that there is another split, right? I mean, how devastating the rings go in the ego thought system. So you have those thoughts that we want to be aware of in our consciousness. But the ego, which the end of every mythical me is a certain death. All bodies, the natural and inevitable result of every body identification is death. So the world educates us. So the ego keeps 90% of its beliefs, core beliefs and laws and rules out of our conscious awareness, down buried, so that we are actually being completely controlled by it and its fear and its need for guilt. But while it remains unconscious, it can't be brought to the light to be healed. And so we are, animatrons by the ego thought system until, thank God we're learning, hey, this is an ego thought system, and only the thoughts that we share with the mind of God are true thoughts. So I'm so grateful to learn that, that these aren't even our real thoughts, but to see that there's a split, that we're only entertaining 10%. Yeah. But with Holy Spirit, we can actually ask that all of these hidden unconscious beliefs that we're carrying around be brought to our awareness through forgiveness, and accepting the atonement will be dissolved. Yeah.
Beautiful. So maybe we just cap on that, because I remember when I first began these lessons many years ago, I was confused. I thought there was a contradiction here at this point in the lessons, lesson 16, because he was saying in the previous lessons that the ego's thoughts are meaningless. I mean, I'm seeing a meaningless world because my thoughts are meaningless, basically. That's basically what he's saying.
Yeah.
And then here in this lesson, he's saying there are no neutral thoughts. Right? So it's just a bit confusing for a beginner. It was for me. He says they're meaningless, and then he says they're not neutral, no idle thoughts. So I
That's
just wanted to
good.
cap on that, or
Yeah,
clarify that. The
sure.
way that I understand it, maybe you could add to this too, sis,
Mhm.
is that okay, so all the thoughts that we think through the split mind are absolutely meaningless,
Yeah, do you
right?
want me to do the stop share for a moment while we're unpacking that?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Uh-huh.
Um, they're absolutely meaningless, and that's that, right? But the other thing we need to see side by side with that,
Mhm.
every thought we have, whether it's meaningless and comes from the ego thought system, part of our mind, the split mind, or whether it's a thought from God, it's all going to manifest something here at the level of form.
Yeah. Can we, maybe it would help to put it in context of the gap diagram, but only when our mind is at one with God are any thoughts meaningful, meaning we're thinking in terms of wholeness before the fragmentation or the thought of separation occurred. So all of our thoughts are meaningful, they're real, they're true, they result in peace and love and joy and purpose and function, and right. So that's reality. And yet, while we entertain this belief in the gap, right, every thought that the ego has is going to manifest some resulting form in this gap diagram, in the space in between. This guy right here, mythical me, is going to have some experience as a result of every ego thought that we entertain. But we have to remember that nothing within the gap is actual. This is the illusion. So every thought, it's fantasy, and yet it's still going to have positives and negatives according to the ego, and it's going to have things that are powerful and not powerful, or good, or what it deems bad. But Jesus is saying, unless it's a thought that we share with God, it isn't real. So right now we're talking about, in this realm, every thought you have is going to have some effect to the body and its story.
Thanks, that's helpful. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, where am I? Paragraph 4, I think.
I think it's, hang on. I think it's paragraph 3, actually. It starts with beside.
Yeah, I screwed up that third sentence, so I know we covered it, but I'm happy to reread it.
I think so.
Okay. In addition to never being idle, the thoughts are never idle, they're never neutral. Salvation requires that you recognize that every thought you have will bring either peace or war, either love or fear. A neutral result is impossible because a neutral thought, God, did I do it again? A neutral result is impossible because a neutral thought is impossible. There is such a temptation to dismiss certain fear thoughts as unimportant, trivial, and not worth bothering about that it is essential you recognize them as all as equally destructive, but equally unreal.
That's an important point.
Yeah.
There is such a temptation to dismiss fear thoughts, right,
Mm-hmm.
as unimportant, trivial, and not worth bothering about, that it is essential you recognize them all as equally destructive, but equally unreal. And I think this kind of thinking
Mm-hmm.
happens a lot in a lot of New Age type teachings and New Age spirituality. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, no, don't do fear. Let's not look at the fear. All
Yeah.
right. Let's just let's teach, love, peace, and brown rice.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's just have positive thinking. But
Right.
it's the ego that's doing the positive thinking, And in its deep unconscious, it is actually suppressing and denying
That's
the
right.
fear thoughts,
Yeah.
which ends up sabotaging us because they have to be projected outward because they're suppressed and denied. So this is where he's saying, you know, we've got to be be conscious, be aware, be present, be mindful, not to suppress, deny stuff, right?
So there's no hierarchy in the gap. Everything is equally illusory, and all those thoughts will have negative effects. And so we really want to just be able to catch every single one that flits by without deciding this is the one worth entertaining, but let's not even worry about that one, or that's uncomfortable, let's not address that. Let's just talk about the top 10% tier. I don't really want to go in and look and see what the ego has me believing.
Well said, Sid. Thank you. That's exactly, I remember going through this, going, no, that through the ego, I thought I knew my own best interests. So I would sort out what I would invite Holy Spirit in to heal.
Mm-hmm.
I would sort it out and go, well, you can have this, but you can't have this, right?
Yeah,
Can't
right.
have this one. Yeah,
Yeah.
doesn't work.
Somewhere in the Course, Jesus talks about the slightest frown or this little bit of irritation is the same as a wish for, you know, or the thought of death. It's just a little form of death, but it's the same thing in our thought. It's, wow, the slightest frown. Okay. Anyway, coming back, we will practice this idea in many forms before you really understand it. So, in applying the idea for today, search your mind for a minute or so with eyes closed and actively seek not to overlook any little thought which tends to elude the search. This is quite difficult until you get used to it. You will find that it is still hard for you not to make artificial distinctions. Every thought that occurs to you, regardless of the quality which you assign to it, is a suitable subject for applying today's idea. In the practice periods, first repeat the idea, I have no neutral thoughts. Then, as each thought crosses your mind, hold it in awareness while you tell yourself, this thought about fill in the blank is not a neutral thought. That thought about fill in the blank is not a neutral thought. So this thought about my body is not a neutral thought. That thought about, I don't know what, my dinner, the car, what I have to do today is not a neutral thought.
My bills,
Yeah,
paying my bills, right?
paying my bills is not a neutral thought, right? As usual, use today's idea whenever you are aware of a particular thought which arouses uneasiness. The following form is suggested for this purpose. This thought about fill in the blank is not a neutral thought because I have no neutral thoughts. 4 or 5 practice periods are recommended if you find them relatively effortless. If strain is experienced, 3 will be enough. The length of the exercise period should also be reduced if there is discomfort. I
So,
have no neutral thoughts.
yeah, you're reading, of course, the annotated, sorry, the
COA, yeah.
COA version, right?
Yeah.
Circle of Atonement version. I'm reading the FIP version here. And I noticed that just after paragraph 4, 1 or 2 paragraphs was removed from the
Oh,
FIP version.
really? Go ahead and read it.
You read just then are not here. Yeah, that's sad. Oh, sorry, I'm just being honest, you know.
No, I agree with you. I'd love to hear what was taken out.
Well,
Usually that COA includes things that had been edited out, but in this situation, FIP is actually more complete.
no, yours is more complete. Sorry. The Circle of Atonement. That's what
Oh,
I'm saying. You read a paragraph or 2
that
that
you
has
don't
been
have.
edited out of this version
Okay,
after
good.
paragraph 4. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, what do you have down for the practice?
It's the same. This
Okay.
thought about fill in the blank is not a neutral thought.
Okay.
That thought about fill in the blank is not a neutral thought. Yeah, it's the
Got it.
same.
Yeah,
It's,
because I have no
that's
neutral thoughts. Yeah.
some good stuff in there.
Okay. So what I'm taking away really, cause is in the mind. There's nothing out there that isn't a direct effect from my thoughts. So that's the massive reversal of what the world teaches and what most people believe, including, the scientists, medical world, health laws. So everything that we're experiencing and seeing is a result of what thoughts we're entertaining. So he's saying, so if that's true, and it is, then we need to really watch the thoughts. And how will we know what thought system we're electing to go by or use? It's the, how's your life? How do you feel? What is, there's the manifestation of your thoughts. So every thought is producing something. That's really a big accountability lesson.
And it is too. And even more so, I mean, as far as volume is concerned,
Yeah.
play it loud, even more so when we have an emotional charge around a particular
Right.
situation or a person or whatever. You can bet your bottom dollar that you're really bringing that manifestation into form very quickly by the emotional charge, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And isn't that interesting? Almost like the level of the emotional charge is going to make us want to believe that it's actually out there and not in my mind.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that goes for good, seemingly good stuff as well.
Right. Yes. So all emotional response really is by the ego to get us to want to not make that switch that, hey, this is happening because I chose the thoughts in my mind first.
First.
Yeah. Okay. Which I
Thank
think leads us into lesson 17, if I'm right. Okay. Well, thank you, sis. That's great. That's a lot. I have no neutral thoughts. So nothing's neutral because I have no neutral thoughts. Thanks, sis.
you.